What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another
Well,
episode of Axioms on Trial. I'm Mike, and against my left here is Cease to Know. How you doing there, brother?
great. How are you?
I say left on my screen. It's probably right on the other screen, but
Yeah, it's fine.
yeah, yeah. So it's probably everyone's like, "Do you know basic directions?" Nope, I don't. Do I know anything? I don't know. We'll find out the course of the show. Yeah, so we got a little rushed, a little late start. Sorry for that, everybody. I tried to bounce a couple theists to get on the show last moment, so didn't really pan out. And that's my fault on there, but I have a cherry on top of that, and that's October 3rd. We actually will have Matt Slick will be on the show, believe it or not, and it'll be him with Cease talking about worldviews. We haven't really hammered out exactly what we'll talk about. I talked to him on the phone for a little bit last night. He gave me some dad jokes, which was pretty amusing. But he's a nice guy, so that should be a good conversation. Are you excited for that?
I'm very excited. I'm looking forward to it. I've watched him on a couple of videos, sort of giving the pre-sub arguments and that type of thing. And I mean, I'm excited to see how the conversation plays out. I'm ready for it.
Yeah, me too. Well, yeah, we usually try to just get into to the meat of everything if we can. But a quick shout out to all the other atheist content makers, Atheist Roundtable, Empathetic Atheist, guys like GeoSam. Check the comments. We got Murder. Yeah, see Murder Shed Steve in there. Um, if I'm missing people, I'm sorry. It's hard to come up. I try to do this off the top of my head. So, but everybody, if you're making content, Skylar Fiction, Math Pig, all those guys, we all appreciate it. So, it gives us inspiration to do the shows as well. But tonight we're going to go into, well, I was about to say the problem of evil, which was going to be initially the topic, but actually we're going to talk about meaning in life without a God, which is usually a topic I feel like it's brought up. If you get on the lower level of religious debates, which would be TikTok, it's like the number one thing that people are posting on there. But even in higher level apologetics, you'll see that you can't have a foundation for meaning. So, in reference to more of those apologetics, what do you think about those, and like what would be your starting point on either what's wrong with it or how you derive meaning, however you would want to start?
Yeah. So let me start by saying this. I think that type of sort of in quotations uh, argument is probably one of the weakest that I've heard. And I dismiss it along the same lines of my argument for morality, which is all you really need to create meaning is consciousness. But I want to point out that up until this point, up until recently, maybe even this week, my perception of the people who were making these type of arguments were that maybe they're just so indoctrinated that they can't imagine a life different than the one that they understand and have grown up with. Maybe they're just so outside of the so experience with critical thinking or philosophy or anything like that that they don't really doubt their own assumptions, and that's why they would say something like that. But I'm starting to wonder, with some of the most recent conversations that I've had, if there isn't almost a sociopathic level to the people that say these kind of things. I'm not saying that everybody that says there's no meaning without God has those tendencies, but I think some do. Because really what is being said is that without belief in an eternal life, without belief that meaning is given to you, then nothing matters. There's no difference in the content of a good experience versus a bad experience. So any love that I might have for friends or family or for the things I'm passionate about, any person who's living wants to engage in, suddenly just stops having any value just because you know there's not some predestined goal put forth for me on my behalf. It's completely ridiculous, and the logic doesn't follow. Um, why should it be the case that I can only have meaning if I'm going to live forever? Where is the relation conceptually between those things?
Yeah, I think that's my actual first problem that I bring up is like, um, you can use a simple, just like, I don't really want to read a book that never ends. I don't think there's any meaning to that. But I also like if you drive, like I always use the example of the car you drive will always, it's going to end up in a landfill. So if you have that meaning of like, well, it's just going to end up in a landfill. Like, why do you care? It's like, well, that's why you have the value of taking care of it, and it doesn't last forever. That it's going to potentially end up there, so you take care of it. It gives value because it's fragile in that sense. I think you actually lose meaning when something isn't like that. In that case.
I agree, and if anything, the fact that I'm aware that every moment I have is temporary, and that there's a finite amount of them that I'm going to have, actually makes me value those moments more. If I'm just going to believe that, one, that this life here is just a test for then another life that's never going to end. I mean, that sounds like hell to me. And this type of argumentation goes right alongside a complete misconception and strawmanning of naturalism. Because I'll hear people say things like, if all we are is chemicals and sort of physical reactions of sorts in a deterministic universe, well, then how could you find value or meaning in that type of universe? And again, it's absurd. It's not realizing that consciousness is a part of the totality of those things. People think that by objective would just mean what is real independent of the mind, but no, the mind is a factor in everything else. It's part of the whole. So it's also part of the objectivity and what we would call reality.
Yeah.
Were you saying that?
Oh no, yeah, I was agreeing. Yeah, I would say. Speaking of, let me give a quick shout out. Oz, actually, I didn't realize this. Someone mentioned this, but he had a birthday and he got married today. And he was on. I was about to drop the F-bomb, but I'm trying to keep this a family show. He was on the frickin' Truth Wanted show. I always want to say Talk Heathen because I always get those two mixed up for some reason. But I think that's really awesome.
Yeah, congrats on
that happened. Awesome. We had a hint of that potentially happening in the past when we had Dan on the Atheist Roundtable, but wasn't. We wasn't sure how far booked they were, so I'm glad to see that happened sooner than like a year, because I assumed they would be booked up, just given how many people clamor to be on that. So that's really awesome. But to get back on track, yeah, I think it's like the cosmic doormat thing, that people reference, that you wipe your feet off before the real life begins. It's like you have like one meaning in that aspect, like a very totalitarian. Dictated meaning to get to like this celestial, North Korea to, cite Hitchens. To me, it's like even if we just compare the meanings in that aspect, I think there's just in the fact that you have no imposition of will on what your freedom would, or your meaning would be, is just like so beautiful in itself. Like there's absolutely no imposition for you to create the meaning that is the most coherent, that coincides with morality, that isn't just, hey, I want to have a life of just killing people, because I think me and you would agree we're both I guess I don't really like terminology for it, but I guess moral realist would be the best way to sure. Cage us, right? Yeah. So I think anything that would coincide with that in that regard of meaning is way more immense than just having this never-ending story where your potential loved ones are probably burning in hell for that entire time as well, because they didn't take the same actions you did in the, one meaningless life.
And I don't think that people need a degree in philosophy to recognize how idiotic that kind of approach is when talking about meaning. Like, what else could we mean by the character of the experiences we have with people, with ourselves with the things that we care about and want to engage in. It's. I think maybe this is why I'm saying what I'm saying about there potentially being a level of sociopathy, people that say these type of things. It's like, if the only source of meaning is your belief in God, then you don't really care about your family or your friends or your career or the experiences you're having. Like, you must not be able to connect emotionally to those things.
Sure. I mean, but in virtue, they're meaningless, because if they're not part of the actual meaning or the goal, then what use wouldn't that actually be the things that are meaningless in that sense, right?
It's very telling to me. I was talking to someone on, this troll and I try to stay away from that type of stuff, but sometimes I get sort of roped in these conversations, and he tried to diminish what I was saying as though it's a slogan. Like, I'm saying nothing different than something like, live, laugh, love kind of approach.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, what do you think life is? Like, why strip away? Again, I just don't think that any psychologically healthy person, religious or not, even those who are religious, would be that quick to say, my parents don't matter, my friends don't matter, my career doesn't matter, my passions don't matter, all because at some point I'm going to die. Like, it doesn't follow. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And I think of how I want to say this. It seems to me that the only thing that one needs is to acknowledge that we're agents in the world, we are part of the world, and that there are things that purely being conscious beings fulfill us. And all we mean by meaning, and all that could be meant by worth, is engaging in those things. I have self-worth because I'm alive, and because I have the consciousness to self-reflect and to value myself. Value doesn't have to be given to me. It's something that I'm creating because I have the ability to create it. And I can describe love in chemical terms, by whatever chemicals get released in the brain when I love somebody.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't undermine the experience, the meaning, and the power of it.
Sure. Yeah. It's like this. If you can reduce it to this to I guess what you'll probably, and I don't want to straw man anybody, but what I've heard Matt Slick refer to as like the brain fuzz or brain fizz or whatever. But it seems as if you get to that level of where that means it means nothing because of its level of reduction, where you can break it down into those chemicals and things like that, and therefore its overall purpose has no meaning. I've never understood that.
It makes no sense.
Yeah, I've never understood that that argument. It's like to me, it would make as much sense as saying, like, well, your food is just, if you break it down, it's these atoms. Like, it's like, well, yeah, but I get the use of the food. I don't care what chemical. Like, that's interesting, but at the end of the day, the value I get out of it is the nutrition, and it just seems like a very weird, almost non sequitur type of response to
yeah, it's a complete non sequitur. It's a complete non sequitur, and it's also failing to understand that we use different types of languages to describe the same phenomenon. So I can talk about love poetically or anecdotally, say how, the type of impact it's had on my life, and I can talk about it in terms of chemical and chemistry and they're both descriptions of the same thing, and neither are stripping anything away from the concept and from the experience. So again, there's a total lack of creativity and sort of connection with reality by the people that are making these arguments. And again, I think it's ultimately, I'm at a point now where I'm trying to recognize that it's not something that you can communicate to a person that doesn't feel these things the way that we do. It's almost like, how do we explain to a colorblind person what red is if they can't see it? if you're that detached from what brings, most people fulfillment and what is meant by meaning, if you're that sociopathic and detached from these things, then there is nothing that can be offered to you for you to be able to connect in that way. Then of course you're gonna somehow have to tell yourself that there is some greater thing that you call God, that you seek or think that is, it's almost like these people without religion would somehow fall into a total nihilistic spiral that they wouldn't be able to function or recover from. And so if that's the case, fine, keep your delusions. But don't tell me that I need the delusions to have meaning. Just because you have that type of weakness in you doesn't mean that I do. And that's the kind of thing that bothers me. Is that now we're being told that our meaning is illusionary just because they don't have the awareness and the strength and the creativity to be able to experience it, because they're stuck in this very dogmatic way of thinking.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And that's something actually I've been told. So the video that I had prepared for later, I haven't seen it either. I've been told about it. You haven't seen it either. So I think that'll be interesting. I hope it yields the results it does. But I have a feeling it'll touch upon what most get into, which is this foundational sense. Presuppers bring them up in transcendentals. People who are just theists in general will probably just root them in the necessary foundation or something like that, of God or something. Do you what do you see? Like, do you see any problems inherently with, I mean, I don't want to say presupposing, because some people might say that they get it through some kind of revelation or something, or some personal experience, but it feels to me that it's always presupposed, in that sense that you have this foundation and you're creating this panacea to just kind of serve as the basis for, well, in this worldview, if I postulate that this is the necessary foundation, then of course it is. But couldn't you, by via reductio, just put insert anything in there that you want? You could go as far as saying flying spaghetti monster. And do you see, like, what do you see with that postulated as like the necessary foundation?
But it's a complete, like, I think we were talking about this last time. It's just a misuse of the tool of logic and a misuse of language. That's something that's going to come up a lot, and I'm probably going to sound like a broken record, but that's what it is. There's nothing necessary about it. There's no, it's, the mistake, and this is the same mistake that Vlad made in our debate on Spartan Theology's channel several months ago, where he seems to think that if you can imagine something being the case in one possible world, and this is, if you can imagine the most perfect, the greatest being possible, that by default it has to be the case that it exists, just because I can imagine such a thing, and somehow logically that signifies that it has to be the case. Because it couldn't be the case if it wasn't. It's so obvious that there's a disconnect between what I can imagine and what could actually be the case. We can imagine anything, but that doesn't bring it into actuality. And that's not how logic works. Yes, logic is descriptive, but we can also come up with logical syllogisms that are logically coherent, that don't actually capture something real. So it kind of works both ways in that sense. So the laws of logic are descriptive, but then when you can build upon that, you can create certain language games that might or might not reflect the way things actually are.
Sure.
And in this case, they don't reflect it. Again, it's also the usual just mistakes in language. People think they're saying something they're not. Like, what do we mean by perfect being? It's a meaningless term with no content. What could be
Well, exactly, and I have that problem with like the max, like, especially when you get into maximal or things like that, where it's um, you have this idea where, well, I could define maximal as something, or maximally great as something that has the least amount of restrictions possible. It's maximally great because it has no restrictions, and in that case is the most simple answer, which in that case is something that is not dependent upon a mind. It just simply is the way it is. It's just simply a foundation in that sense. I could define it that way if I wanted to, and I don't see any problem with it. And I've actually, from my opinion, I think I've given at least something for someone to try to at least falsify or take apart in that sense, where it's
Right,
like, hey, well, what I'm saying is that the simplest answer would be the best, or something that has the least amount of imposition on it. In that case, which seems to be maximally great, seems to just have to entail this conscious being that's, I don't get it. Is it super big? Is it like, I don't know what the attributes that you get, and then once you get them, how did you get them? What was the like epistemological foundation in which you could even decipher the ontology of this thing that you're discussing?
And also, even if you did, so what? Even if you could come up with a more specific definition, which they never do, why would that lead anybody to think that because I can imagine it, that gives it life into existence? And we can imagine a lot of things. And it's just an awareness of what tools we're using and of how language functions.
Sure.
And yeah, it's just completely unconvincing.
Yeah. Well, you want to hop into? We got about 23 minutes into that. Is there anything you want to add in before we hop into a clip, or do you want to?
No, I think the only thing that I'll restate is that ultimately you get to a point where when someone's intuitions are so completely opposite to yours, and when their perspective is also so grounded in dogmatism and indoctrination, there's just no point. I try to find common ground with people who see the world different than I do. I value these conversations. That's why when I have religious people on.
Sure.
But ultimately, if someone says something like that, where there's just no meaning unless God says there is, it's almost like at this point I just want to turn away. Like there's no point in continuing the conversation, because it's like you don't feel what I feel about life, and there's nothing that I can say or present to you that's going to make you connect to it, because there's something missing psychologically in your ability to connect with life. And that's not something that a rational philosophical conversation is going to present to you, because there's something deeper wrong there.
Yeah.
So that's all.
Well, and it's I guess before we hop into it, it's like and people can make fun of me now if they want, but I thought that there was a big hole in TikTok counter apologetics, because some of the people on there just believe some insane things, and I think that is because people on there just have just these crazy epistemology that they apply in their. It seems that they apply to their beliefs, but not in everything else that they do. I think it's worth pointing those things out, and one of the first videos that I had done on there was in reference of that. Like, I think I even started the video out like, I get asked a lot, how do you derive meaning in life as an atheist? And it was the most successful video on there. I think it got like a couple 100,000 views and like tens of thousands of likes. So it is a topic that I only bring that up not to boast, but just to say, like, out of all the videos and things I've ever done, whether it's arguments or things like that, it seems to hit people the most in terms of like their meaning or purpose. And the more people I talk to, I talked to a guy on a Discord through text who was trolling as a flat earth Christian. And then I got to him admit that he was trolling, and he started talking about how he thinks there's just no meaning in life. And this is why he trolls, is because he doesn't have meaning. And he could have been trolling me still there, but he was like, I'm being very serious at this point. And it always spawns on me that that's always what drives people a lot, is like, how they derive meaning, or whether they get stuck in this loop of there's no meaning. And you can do it from either side. I mean, you can sit there and point these flaws out and whatever, but the problem is if you're trying to compare like something, and from my opinion, that's where you're almost dictated into what has meaning, everything on the sides of that seem to not have value because there's really only one goal and one ultimate thing, which just creates this inherent everything else is meaningless. Whereas when you have the ability to create meaning, it takes restrictions, it takes the imposition of will for you to have it. And I bring that video up just mainly because I think it is like a soft spot for most people on both sides of the aisle.
And I wonder how many people stay in religion because they're afraid that without it, they'll lose meaning. That they're so used to this type of community and type of, it's like you're so used to that type of framework that you define yourself by that so much that it's almost like you're too afraid to leave that for something else because you'll feel like your life will just not have an aim or meaning behind it. Yeah, and look, I mean, again, I don't think it takes a philosophy degree to recognize how ridiculous that is. But for anybody interested or who makes that assumption, there are centuries of existentialist philosophy, atheistic and otherwise, that deals exactly with this question.
Mm-hmm.
People like Sartre, people like Nietzsche. Now, Kierkegaard was in some way religious, but not in the modern Christian type of way. His was a little bit more abstract than that. But there's much there in the tradition of philosophy that answers those questions, that shows how, if anything, with the freedom of not being somebody else's creation and slave, essentially, you actually can create more meaning for yourself.
Yeah.
But it seems like something counterintuitive to some people, which to me it never was, but it seems to be for some people. And if that's the case, people should educate themselves on what these traditions have to say about it, not just make the assumption and then believe whatever. Read up on it. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll leave it at that.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, I think that's a good spot to pull this up now. And so again, I'll preface beforehand that I haven't seen this, and Cease has not seen this. And the title of the video is "Why There Is No Meaning in Atheism." So it's less of probably about meaning in life, but I'd be interested just to see and go through this. This will just be a part 2 thing. This guy I've actually been requested when I was going through clips and trying to find something to surprise Cease with. I remembered once I scrolled down that someone was like, "Hey, you need to do a review of this guy." And when I saw that, I was like, "Well, hey, I guess we'll just do it together then, and we'll have to go through it. We'll have to hold hands in this together." But let me know if the audio is good.
How many times I've come across
We're good?
Yeah.
Awesome.
atheists who say that even though our universe is meaningless, one can still lead a meaningful life. Statements such as these sound nice, sure, but sounding nice is not quite the same thing as making sense. And since atheists usually take pride in their alleged commitment to rationality,
I'll let it buffer for a second. Anything you want to add already?
Yeah, already. I mean, the first sentence he said is nonsense. He said, even though we're in a meaningless universe, it's already false. If consciousness is part of the universe, which it is, then, and consciousness is a basically sort of a framework which can create meaning, well, then there is a meaning in the universe, in the sense that we exist in the universe, we create meaning, therefore meaning is present in the universe. Now, yes, if you remove consciousness, then meaning wouldn't be found, but so what? It doesn't mean that it's illusionary. You wouldn't say that vision is an illusion just because if you were to remove minds, it wouldn't exist. It's such a silly argument. And These people seem to somehow make a distinction between us and consciousness and the rest of the universe. Like there's some sort of separation there, as opposed to recognizing that we are part of the whole. So it's a really, it's a flawed approach from the start. It just doesn't.
Yeah. By the way, can you still see my picture? It went black on my end.
No, I can't see him.
Yeah, so I apologize for that. I think StreamYard has some bugs that they're working out because that happened as soon as I pulled this up. I noticed, but yeah, I agree. Let's see. I think that was a perfect place to pause it, actually, right there. But let's dive into this.
Fishy statements such as there is no objective meaning to the universe, but you can still create your own meaning certainly deserves some scrutinizing. That's exactly what this video is about.
All right, so now we know the premise of the video. I think we pretty much hit the jackpot here of what we wanted to see, so let's go.
Yeah, and this is also the same type of, I'm sure that he's misusing the term objective, because people seem to think that objective means just what exists independently of mind, but that's not the complete definition, because minds also exist in the totality. So whatever is true about minds is also an objective truth we can discuss. And again, we all experience things subjectively, but there's an underlying objectivity to it, which is why we can communicate about what we're experiencing subjectively. It doesn't mean it's relative.
Sure.
So these are all just misuses of the language at every step.
Yeah. I figured taking myself out would actually make this work, but it didn't. So we'll continue on with it.
And what you'll learn by the end of it is that any atheist talk about creating your own meaning in an otherwise...
I'll just turn down the... Oh man, we'll go to the 360p.
This meaningless universe is nothing but the grandiose
I think it's issues with StreamYard.
What do you think is going on with it?
Yeah, no, so it's buffered. It's just something's going on with StreamYard because it blocked out my face, and it's not doing well with that, which sucks. But here, I'll let it run through. I'll hit one point, let you go over it. I'll back out and back in, and
Sure.
by then I'll jump right back in.
exercise in self-deception.
Self-deception.
This is Lucas from...
Yeah, I wonder why it's having so much trouble. I wonder if it would run better if we did it from my computer.
Yeah, I mean, can you share the screen?
I'm not sure how to do that. We'll have to try that at some point.
Yeah, we'll have to do that. Yeah, we'll have to do that at some point. That sucks.
On atheism, the natural world is all there is. Reality is ultimately made up of matter, and everything you see can be broken down into the particles.
All right, so he's explaining that everything basically can be reduced down into these particles. What do you think would be said?
I think he's going to do the thing I was mentioning earlier, where he's going to claim that because you can give a mechanistic description of things, that somehow strips away their meaning, which doesn't make any sense. Again, I can talk about love in terms of chemicals released in the brain. So what? It doesn't take away the value of the experience. It doesn't take away the experience itself. It doesn't strip anything away from it. So it's just another way of describing a phenomenon, and you can describe it in different ways. You still be talking about the same thing. It's a total non sequitur to claim that if everything is matter, nothing has meaning or nothing matters. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I guess I'm not going to probably be able to fix it. I don't know what it did. I know it's not on my end because my camera works.
Okay.
But this will just probably have to do for now in terms of my video feed. Yeah, so hopefully we'll be able to apologize to everybody's or anyone that's watching. We just can't get that video clip to run something on StreamYard. I know it's not on my end because I have that fiber. I paid extra, man, and I'm not getting my value. Then I got problems with AT&T. But yeah, so this whole thing this whole idea, you reduce it down into this, it's, I know we touched on this, but it's these molecular compounds can make up, love essentially, or you can break it down into these chemical compounds. I've never grasped the concept of why reducing something like that, or consciousness. So I take a different approach than you on the hard problem of consciousness, in the sense of where I'm more of a reductionist, where you aren't, right? So
no, but I'm a reductionist in the sense that I think everything can be reduced to the physical, but I'm a it's a weird definition. I define myself as a non-reductive physicalist. So I think everything is one thing, and I think everything is physical, but I think because of certain problems with language and limitations of subjectivity, we can't reduce consciousness to purely a physical description, because language is always secondary to the phenomena. So I still think everything is physical. I just think that in the moment that we're using a description for something physical, the description is not the thing itself. There is a gap there, and so something is not being captured by the language and by the description. So that's why, I don't think that it can fully be reduced. But it doesn't mean that I think there's some sort of other, like mental layer of existence
sure
separate from the physical. I don't think any of that.
Sure. All right. Well, since I backed out and backed in, I'll try it one last time, so we can get another clip in there. There's someone in the audience that made a good point here, which is most atheists are methodological naturalists, not metaphysical naturalists, or what some people call philosophical naturalists. Yeah, he is pretty much a walking straw man in that sense. It's like those claims can be. There's people that have them, and I think that's why he says most. But there's people that have that. But yeah, I would say that if you're going to just say all atheists, right, like the title of the video is what why there's no meaning in atheism, and paint them all the same, when we can show you there's distinctions in these types of metaphysical claims, or at least our knowledge to them. Yeah, it's exactly that. It's a walking straw man. And Mama Bear, I do apologize. Something's wrong with StreamYard, even to the point where my avatar isn't showing. It's just a black symbol on my screen. So I don't know what's going on there. I don't want to completely back out and leave Cease by himself and not be able to get back in, but I also feel sad that my face is gone. I'm just a black blob.
Can we try to restart it somehow? How would that work?
We could end the broadcast and do it. We got 5 people that popped in here. We can just try to go. We'll try to go with the clips. I'll get more of your opinion on them, and I'll add some things in there. It kind of sucks that it went out that way, but it's my luck with how my day's been going. So it's just the way it goes.
Happens.
The physics. This, of course, includes you as a human being. According to atheists, you're just a somewhat more complex arrangement of matter, and thus only slightly different from a brick stone.
Slightly different.
Slightly. So that would be a composition division fallacy there, if he's going just based off of like the parts and then inferring that the wholes would be just slightly different. I feel like you would be committing a composition division fallacy there just right off the bat, or just even a category error, false equivalency. I mean, a whole host of problems with that.
I mean, how can you say that? Do walls produce consciousness? Can walls experience? Like, what kind of argument is that?
Yeah. Well, hopefully he has something to substantiate it.
Well, okay, unlike a brick stone, you're at least a living organism made up of cells with the ability to reproduce, but don't ever think that you're somehow special. No. Just like the mosquito annoyingly buzzing over your head at night or the mouse roaming your backyard, you're nothing but a collection of randomly mutated genes and biomolecules which natural selection graciously picked in the course of history. And that's because at the bottom layer of reality is just raw matter. Ever since our purposeless universe inexplicably popped into existence with neither cause nor goal. What's more, that universe is slowly but steadily running out of energy until it will die the so called heat death, which will mean that at some time in the future, neither movement nor life will be possible anymore.
Okay, so I'm not really sure what that has anything to do with anything.
I'm still waiting to see what about us being matter means that's all we are, like as though, yeah, we're matter, and through that we're able to experience and feel and make decisions and have beliefs and fall in love and find passions. Like, why would the fact that ultimately we're made of matter? Hey, you're back.
Yeah, that was strange.
Again, he just because he says we're just matter, that's not an argument. Like, what about the fact that we're matter strips away the importance of existence? It just doesn't make sense. And yeah, I mean, well, he also said that the universe came into being inexplicably. I mean, there's much known as to how that took place, first of all. And second, so what that there isn't a will to the universe or sort of a conscious design and aim? Why would that doesn't matter?
Yeah.
The fact is we exist. We have the capacity to self-reflect and reflect on our place in the world, and therefore we can derive meaning from our situation.
Yeah. I'm not a fan of his brick analogy there. It's like you could just say like they're comprised of atoms, so therefore we could our oceans would be comprised of bricks instead of water. It's like it's just such a weird argument to use.
Well, neither one of those things is conscious. So there is a universe of difference between that. I mean, and he just downplaying. Like, oh, well, the only real difference is that you're a living entity, but it doesn't really make much of a difference. It's like, what are you? That's insane. It makes all the difference.
Yeah. Oh no, we were doing well.
We were.
As the universe will return to the randomness.
What I found is just, I guess, giving it the second that it needs. But yeah, I can't. Yes, I am back. That is right. I had to just hop into a new tab, I guess. But the problem I have there, it sounds like he's just putting one needle in at a time and just building this nice scarecrow up, this nice straw man of a thing, because he's gone from positions that, and I guess that's the reason why I brought up the reductionist thing to tie that in a knot, was like there are different positions, like whether it's and by cogito ergo sum I mean the guy in our chat, not Descartes cogito, his username is that, but he brought up the whole methodological naturalist versus metaphysical naturalist, and that's just another example. But both of those are examples of the fact that if you try to strawman that position, I mean, you've immediately, like, it doesn't apply to one of those sides. Even if you were directly referring to like the metaphysical naturalist or the person that says I can produce everything, qualia doesn't exist or something, we can reduce this down into the physical. There are still those people that have that. So that's my biggest thing, is like from the get-go you have this whole title here, which is why there's no meaning in atheism. It's like, it just doesn't, that whole thing to me is like incoherent within itself.
But again, I have to see where is the logical connection between things being made of matter and a lack of meaning or purpose. What is the connection there conceptually?
Sure.
How do you go from one to the other? There's some sort of weird intuitions people have that just doesn't. Again, I think it's a total lack of. I don't know. I don't get it. I don't know where it comes from, but
Yeah. Well, I think you hit it on the head there. I mean, that's pretty much what it is. Is just like there's this, like
it's almost like there's a self-hate there to some degree.
well,
my
yeah,
mind.
there has to be something at the base level to like make it have meaning. I mean, they've already applied the sense of that. If you don't have that to justify it, then there's no meaning. So it's clearly this weird bias against just being. I think it's the idea that they think they're just like this big meat sack, conscious meat sack, which is like seems more of a reflection on how you interpret your relations in life and things that you do. I just don't.
Yeah.
I can never get to that pessimistic of a outlook on me as a biological, specimen.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense. It's like somehow, if all we are is matter and if we're animals and life is going to end, somehow that just takes away.
Look, there was millions and millions upon millions of years of development biologically that got us to where we are. I think it would be almost shitting on the process to just state that, because we're matter in some fashion, that it's meaningless. It's like, dude, this had a process, and whether you think that process in itself, absent of mind, had meaning or not, consciousness is arisen in this aspect where I can take advantage of that and I can value my body. It's kind of like the argument you use with the well-being thing. It's like everybody at the baseline cares about their well-being before they do the God or anything, because or any aspect, because everything's predicated on that. Like, well, the only reason they want to go to heaven or hell is mainly based on their well-being. I mean, it has solely to do with them. And their, how they derive value of their well-being. And I think it's just no different when you have, when you're deriving meaning or value, or meaning from that type of value, which it would be to sustain your life or to keep the. I think just there's meaning in just simply going, I experience. Sure, there's a lot of suffering and horribleness, and there's justification for ending a life. I think in certain circumstances, of course, where it's just a better, chance than the experience that they're getting. But I think that there's meaning inherently in just allowing that to pass on to somebody else, to at least have the ability to. And so even survival in its sense is more meaningful to me than some dictated way of what you should do in like a very consequentialist approach.
I just think there's almost there's a lack of appreciation of life for someone to have that perspective. You have to just not, love yourself or love life that much to be so quick to disregard all the things that bring people fulfillment and to just throw all that away in the trash just because we're not going to live forever, just because we're not going to be with gods in an afterlife.
Mm.
And just say, these people are not happy with what they are.
Yeah, that's a really good way to sum it up.
Nothingness and meaninglessness from which it emerged in the first place. So far, so good. I'm fully with the atheist hypothesis. But
I don't think that's an accurate portrayal, but we'll keep building keep putting hay in that straw man.
Now comes the not so subtle atheist sleight of hand. Because instead of actually being consistent and affirming that the meaninglessness of the universe necessarily implies the meaninglessness of his or her own existence, the atheist now simply turns around and claims that you can nevertheless create your own subjective meaning.
Okay, so pause that back real quick. If we can, if it'll let me.
Hopefully StreamYard will work a little better next
own
time.
existence, the atheist now simply turns around.
Yeah, what I did last time to get it to work, at least that one time, was I just kept taking it off and removing it. But essentially, I guess what he's going to get into is how we apply that in the subjective sense. So would you, you touched upon the objective and subjective sense about that, but what are we, I mean, it's like, what are we talking about absent a mind of having the meaning, right?
Well, it is a misuse of the term. Like, yes, we can say that it's subjective in the sense that, like, I might get my meaning from philosophy and music. Someone else might get their meaning from painting or traveling. Okay, the things that we're subjectively experiencing might be different, but the fulfillment derived and the experience derived is essentially the same. We can communicate about it and understand that we're more or less talking about the same type of state of being, relatively speaking. Fulfillment is what it is, and it can come to different forms. It doesn't mean that it's vacuous. And again, there's no inconsistency here from the perspective of the atheist, because there's no separation between the universe and our consciousness. Our consciousness is part of the whole. So as long as consciousness is a tool to create meaning, which is one of the many things that it can do, that we do as conscious creatures, therefore we can say that meaning exists in the universe. To start from the perspective that the universe is meaningless doesn't make sense. Again, the minds are part of the universe. So his premise from the start is fundamentally flawed and mistaken.
And claims that you can nevertheless create your own subjective meaning. You may rally, for example, for some cause of social justice, devote yourself to animal rights, donate to the Richard Dawkins Foundation, or simply enjoy yourself and eat ice cream while sunbathing.
I like the Richard Dawkins thing, as if he thought he was being clever.
At the beach. Whatever you pick, it will provide you with an island of meaning in the vast ocean of our universe's meaninglessness. As I said in the beginning, while this may sound beautiful, it's not only rationally inconsistent to the highest degree, but also a ridiculous form of self-deception. Because if the material universe is all there is, the notion that you can actually create meaning, which is of course an immaterial concept, makes as much sense as to think that you can throw a bucket into a dried up well to pull water from it.
Okay, it's just bullshit on every level.
Yeah.
And also expressed in such a condescending way. Like, this is why, I just, lose my patience with religious people, because, he's saying the most stupid things with the most condescending attitude, for no reason. First of all, there's nothing immaterial about this idea of meaning. We're talking about experiences, which we can break down even in physical terms.
Yeah, it's dependent upon those physical interactions of things. I mean, information in all senses are physical.
Yeah, so again, we can say that the language doesn't fully capture the phenomena, okay? But nowhere does that mean that we're talking about some other state of existence apart from the physical. So he's trying to say, if everything is physical, you can't say that we have meaning, because if this thing is non-physical. It's a mistake on every turn. And what was the one thing you said?
I can go back.
Yeah, I don't remember, but more or less this is what it is. It's just exhausting.
Oh.
but also a ridiculous form of self-deception. Because if the material universe is all there is, the notion that you can actually create meaning, which is of course an immaterial concept, makes as much sense as to think that you can throw a bucket into a dried up well to pull water from it.
So the issue I have there is the what's missing in the water, because he's just trying to say that there's nothing there, right? Would be you would have to, you're basically just ignoring the entire actual circumstances where you would acquire value or meaning in things. You're just basically saying that there's nothing there when the water is there. I mean, that's the problem I have, is that we're just using the language to describe the very real events, right?
It's shocking that people say the same things, because you essentially have to ignore everything that's self-evident about our most basic experience of what it means to have consciousness. You know, like the same thing with morality. Like, all you need to have an argument for meaning is the acknowledgement that consciousness exists. And as such, the experience of fulfillment exists. And that's not immaterial. That's just a state of affairs. You know, there's nothing immaterial about it. We use language that you know. Yeah, it just, these ideas sound plausible to those who can think critically. Yeah, that's exactly the case. These are people that can't. They don't even understand the language they're using. Yeah, it's just really bad. I don't know.
We all have to truck through just a little bit more.
In addition, even if you could magically create meaning in a materialistic and objectively meaningless universe, this subjectively created meaning of yours would be entirely pointless. For if ultimately nothing matters, then whatever you contrive to be your purpose won't matter either.
He's strawmanning the position and saying that if ultimately nothing matters, I mean, if you're saying if you have no meaning, then you have no meaning, you're just stating the same thing twice, is what essentially all I'm hearing in that.
I mean, I thought he was going to. I thought he was saying something along the lines of, if it's temporary, then what's the point? Because it's not going to last. But it's like,
I think that's exactly what gives you meaning. Like, that's, for me, what is like meaning is dependent upon, is like having value, because it will not last forever. That's like what gives meaning. I feel like meaning is dependent upon like finite things.
But also, it should be obvious how flawed this approach is, because it's like, so is the only context in which you would care about having someone's, you know, how do I say this? If someone's trying to kill you, okay, or gouge your eyes out, does that type of experience only mean something and is different from a different type of experience where that's not happening, only if you have eternal life? Like, he's trying to sort of strip away the content of experiences.
Sure.
Just because ultimately we're going to die. It's like, yeah, ultimately I'm going to die, but in the meantime I'm alive, and I seek certain type of experiences as opposed to others because of the content of what those experiences are. And that's where the meaning is derived from. So it just doesn't, it's total non sequitur.
Materialistic and objectively meaningless universe, this subjectively created meaning of yours would be entirely pointless. For if ultimately nothing matters, then whatever you contrive to be your purpose won't matter either at the end.
So if you have it's this analogy at the beginning of the show, is like, if you have a car and it's just going to end up in a landfill, there was no point of the car, right? Like, there was use. I needed to drive it. I got use out of it. I needed to go hang out with my friends, or I needed to take care of it and value it because I knew that it wouldn't last forever. Therefore, it drove meaning for me to take care of it, right? Or like, it's like saying why should you pet your cat? It's just gonna die. Like
Right.
why should you love it? Like, it's just gonna die in 16 years. It's just a horrible argument, and from my perspective, it misses the entire point of meaning.
But also, what does he mean by ultimately doesn't matter? What does that mean? Ultimately, in the greater scheme of things, in the sense of an eternal universe?
Well, because of
that?
it's the temporal implications that he's applying.
Okay, but right. So again, he's starting from the completely wrong and flawed premise. It's nonsense.
End of the day. Let me illustrate this. Imagine we lived in a world in which healthy food does not exist, but everything we take in would cause us to become sick. Now, in such a world, you are of course free to talk about creating for yourself a healthy diet. But that would not change the fact that whatever so-called diet you pick, it will make you sick, just like any other food you could take in. In the same
That whole argument doesn't even work on the basis of the analogy, just in the sense of like, you don't have survivability. Like, it's just a stupid argument. It's like, if you can't eat, then what are we like? How do we have the conversation to eat? I don't understand.
But I fail to understand the connection.
It's such a stupid argument.
Well, he's trying to say that. I think he's saying something along the lines of, if the starting point is bad food, and the starting point is meaninglessness, then you can't create meaning from meaninglessness and good food from bad food. I think that's what he's trying to attempt.
Yeah, I get that, but I don't even see how that's analogous, because. So here, let's.
Well, it's not the right
same
description
way
of.
to say.
I didn't mean to do that. Sorry.
It's not the right description of the state of affairs, because we're not starting from a meaningless universe. We're starting from a universe which has produced consciousness, which produces meaning.
Yeah. So it's almost like that mistaking the map for the territory type of a issue.
But that would not change the fact that whatever so-called diet you pick, it will make you sick, just like any other food you could take in. In the same way, to say that the universe is ultimately meaningless, but that you can still pick some cute little diet of meaning for yourself is nothing short of delusional. But
yeah, so that's the problem, is that nobody is saying that like everything's ultimately meaningless. Just because he's going off of this temporal implication of that, because it's finite, that it's meaningless. But I come from the position that because it's infinite, it would be meaningless. I mean, there would be really no. What is the meaning in a movie that never ends, or like I just don't I don't understand that what you can derive meaning off of if there's no risk or value to be had.
Basically, the problem is that we're defining the term entirely differently. But he's talking as though his definition is the only definition that can apply. Of course, if you want to define meaning as something that existed before we came into existence, some other process given to you by a creator, well then, okay, you've defined your term in a very restrictive way, and nothing is going to fit that definition. But that's your definition, and it's one that I reject. And I don't care that you've chosen to define it that way. That's not how I define it.
Yeah.
And if you, again, it's a lack of appreciation for life. If the only thing that matters is that you can do something for eternity, if that's the key factor here as to what will bring you meaning and purpose, then you're not really, there's a disconnect in the experiences that you're having in this life.
Sure. Yeah. And this is why I kind of named the title of this video, at least for the live. We might go back and rephrase it just for the search engine to be a little bit better in regards to meaning. But the price of everything and the value of nothing, because of Sam kind of brings up points pretty simply, while we're alive, right? So to say it's meaningless is for me to ignore the fact that we're alive, and the price of everything that a lot of us pay for, or that more people who are not as fortunate have to pay for in their life, these horrible struggles, whether they're a kid and their parents were some crack addicted fiends and they're living just horribly. To say that there's no meaning out of getting out of that very real bad situation to value the price of it, that something, everything has to pay, and on the tail end of that, and say that there's the value of nothing there, it just misses the point. The same way that if you don't really understand, from my perspective, the well-being kind of thing, and you've more or less talked to me and coached me on this in my moral philosophy, but it seems that we're talking past you in that sense, because you're not even in reference of what it doesn't seem like you value that, because I think in principle you do. You value everything in a very you comes first before a God thing, even in that, I would argue, in that person's worldview.
And everyone should think about what he's saying, because if he's claiming that the only context for meaning is one where it's eternal and God-given, then if he was to find out somehow that his worldview had been incorrect, and that actually the atheistic world was the correct worldview was the correct one, would he suddenly stop caring about his family, friends, kids? If he has, I mean, I don't know what his situation is.
Yeah, exactly.
Would he just cease to care at all about the character of his experiences and just kill himself? There's something psychologically. If that's the case, anybody who thinks this way, my advice is get therapy.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a really good point, because I think that I draw that line with some people where it's like, I've talked to people, whether it's debates, or I've talked to somebody at a wedding one time when I was outside, just, having a cigar, drinking a beer, a good time. And someone was a little tipsy enough to start getting into the religious topics. And they, had known I was atheist and was like asking about meaning in life and things like that. And I asked them the question flat out, if there was no God, we'll take that position, or you had no reason to think there was, would you like, because he asked me the question, like, what would prevent me from stealing and things like that, the typical question. I asked him, like, well, would you start doing that? And he's like, well, yeah, I mean, there would be nothing to stop me at that point. Like, I would do that. And that's where I go, well, that's where I think that's where the problem is. The problem is not how you're looking at it from the worldview sake. It's your psychology. It's like it's the neurology that's going on there. That's the problem, because it's almost like you need a governor for you to behave. You can't actually just see the value inherently in a proposition that can affect either your imposition of will or well-being.
And I would say that it's more than just a weakness in character and a desire to be a slave, but it's a sickness in character. I mean, there's something psychologically wrong with you if you're incapable of valuing yourself and your experiences in life, and can only do so if you tell yourself that some creator set all this up for you, or really for you to worship it eventually. It's just, it's just sick.
All right, well, let's finish this up.
Either way, you don't have to take my word for it. Check out Friedrich Nietzsche or Jean-Paul Sartre.
Oh, we're about to hit a spot on you. I can already tell.
Who are two of history's most important atheist philosophers. Nietzsche said that once you do away with God, the world will basically turn into something like an abandoned, dark, haunted marketplace where no one wants to be, as it's been completely drained of meaning.
I mean, did he not? That's just so bad.
Yeah,
I don't even know how to respond to that.
I'm wondering I would just assume we would have completely different interpretations of what he's conveying in certain aspects of his work.
Nietzsche's entire point is that you choose to embrace life, and even if you look at this idea that life is meaningless in the sense that it's not meaningful in the context of God, in the context of a given meaning, you make the choice of embracing life, embracing your condition, and rising stronger through that process. And that's what he's referring to. People mistake Nietzsche as being a nihilist, as opposed to it's quite the opposite. His whole philosophy is one that is about embracing, not hopelessness. So I don't know. Again, this is an incredibly surface level reading of Nietzsche.
Sure.
He truly lived what he preached, as he spent the last years of his life in a madhouse. Similarly, Sartre in
I don't know
he
how-
was sick.
I don't know how anybody would use that as a serious argument towards why you shouldn't accept this side. It's like, well, by the way, also this guy he punched old ladies on the street. It's like, wait, what? Like, wait, what? That was like, yeah, that's okay. That has nothing to do with like what he's saying about moral philosophy or what he's saying in regards to meaning in life. Like, that's just something he did.
I mean, this guy. The thing is, hold on, pause it a second. I mean, this guy is actually a liar, because it's well known that Nietzsche's the end of his life had nothing to do with his philosophy. If anything, he lived a fulfilling life because of the way that he thought about things. He ended up in a madhouse because he was sick. I think he had like syphilis or something. And like, I mean, I forget the exact details, but he had like a disease, like a physical ailment, that then eventually ate away at his brain. I mean, I'll look up after the show, and then we can double check for next time. But he's like completely pretending like his situation was because of his belief, as opposed to he was actually like physically, he had an illness.
Yeah, that's a pretty bad thing. Well, we'll go through a little bit more of it. We can probably finish this up either on another one, or depending on your time. I know we're already over time, but it depends on you on that. But I'll give one last little clip here, and we'll close it up. And I'll try to bookmark it.
his play No Exit depicted reality without God, ironically enough, as hell, and affirmed that life was absurd, but that we should just get on with it somehow, I guess. More
And so that's how he brushes off everything you said was just.
Okay. I mean, he can. I mean, that's,
so he tried. Yeah, what you said in, very elegantly about Nietzsche. He just basically just tries to brush it off in a little small blurb, and I think GeoSam just hits it on the head there. It's just like intentionally doing this because. And that's exactly, I think GeoSam, it struck him the way it struck me. It was like the second he added that, it was like, well, now it just seems you're intentionally adding these little blurbs.
Even this is someone, yeah.
No, go ahead.
No, this is someone who didn't read Nietzsche. This is someone who maybe looked at Spark Notes for 10 minutes.
Yeah, I looked at the Wikipedia page.
Or a Wikipedia page and said, and didn't even look at the whole thing, just took out, a couple of quotes and made his own interpretation and conclusions. And then he's saying Nietzsche said, fuck off.
Yeah, it's bad. It's bad.
Recently, another atheist philosopher, Loyal Rue, confessed that even though all of reality is utterly meaningless, we cannot actually live this way, as this would lead to something of an existential collapse. And so he blatantly suggested that we should just deceive ourselves and propagate what he called the noble lie that meaning exists, even though it really doesn't.
I forgot that this guy was the ruler of all atheists, and
right, who cares that some guy said something?
Yeah, I never fucking even heard of this guy, and apparently he's deciding what I fucking believe. So that's
so let's say that he believes that, and he's an atheist. So what? I don't believe that, and I'm an atheist. Send me this video because I want to leave a comment on.
Yeah, and we can do a full video on it, or we can do more Deflate. He's pretty bad at this.
I mean, this is just embarrassing.
Yeah, this is pretty bad. But I mean, he's got the followers. Oh, okay, never mind. He doesn't have that many followers. But yeah. So I will. Let's see, 5:55. Yeah, we'll leave it there for now. because at this point he's just going into like this atheist thinks it's like, to me it's like the argument of saying like Charles Darwin married his cousin, so therefore he's, you know, his evolution theory, like that's wrong. It's like what? Like,
Yeah,
no.
I mean, this is almost, at this point, this is almost like too easy. It's not even worth.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. It's like playing basketball with a 7-year-old.
Yeah,
Or something. It's just not even fun. But yeah, I mean, before I guess we would close it out, like anything you want to say or things about future shows or this show or something you want to just pop in there.
Yeah, a couple of things. You know, and I have to get back in touch with some of the people that I'm trying to have on, but there is one person that I've been talking to who's a progressive Christian.
Okay.
And I think that she has a really interesting perspective on Christianity that I think will be worth exploring on our show.
Of course. Yeah.
I also have a friend of mine who I went to school with, who's, you know, his degree is in psychology, but he's very well read in philosophy, and the guy is brilliant. And I just talked to him last night, and I'm going to try to have him on. He has a lot of interesting things to say, and I kind of want to start focusing more on the interesting questions in philosophy, and that you know, we can examine, because again I do think that there's value to sort of debunking the religious approach to these things. But I also think it's important to spread good ideas as well, and interesting ideas.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's not just going to be, in the future, we're not just going to be doing just religion, but also other ideas. And hell, I mean, if you want, we could even talk about politics at some point down the line. I don't know if you'd be interested.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm probably the one that would be the best moderator for something like that, because I don't have like a huge, like, I have definitely opinions, but I'm very easy on the politics thing to stay out of it. So I'd be very good.
Figure it out. We can talk about it later.
But what I would want to preface to anybody watching is that these shows that we do here probably will be less once we start getting the one-on-ones and the narrations. Like we'll do these whenever we, probably Saturdays, if depending on if we have the guests, but expect to be like with Matt Slick will be the first, you know, one of the first ones we have here, but we'll also have one with Spartan Theology. I think we might do that Monday if I can get him on Monday with the problem of evil or something like that. But we'll do a lot of we're gonna try a lot of different things. Hopefully these types of clips, things that we do, don't get necessarily put on the back burner. But I think Cease might be in agreement with me that we have aspirations to do these narration videos as well as the main ones being kind of one-on-ones, debates, and just going over certain things. So we're going to try a lot of different things. So please subscribe if you haven't. We're gonna have a bunch of different content, throw it all at the wall, and see what sticks the best.
Yeah, we're aiming to do a lot of different things: debates, conversations with people from different backgrounds, and then from time to time these kind of conversations, like breaking down videos. We're not looking to just do one thing. So I think we're all interested in applying a variety of different approaches to the conversations.
Yeah.
So if you guys are interested, please subscribe, and I hope that you're all enjoying what we're doing. And this is our 5th episode, so we're still sort of figuring out the cadence.
Yeah. And I have a feeling it'll, we'll get a lot of push once we do some debates, whether we moderate 2 people or whether it's you or whether it's me or whatever it is, it might push it. But I would like to at some point extend this as a platform, like you said, debates, whether we're involved or not, to host on there would be cool to have that. But mainly we want to get the people that are, to have the conversations that are wanting to have the conversations and not wanting to just, ridicule or anything like that. But we do want to show at the same token that the beliefs are being attacked and not the people. So before we sign out, just remember that we don't hate you, you as a person. We're just going to attack the beliefs, and we're going to, press you on that. So, no offense to be had, but I think the people that will get on the show understand and respect that. Sure. And we'll find that out with you and Matt Slick here coming up. I'm hopefully going to be able to ask him some questions towards the end, but I want to definitely keep that towards you guys. And if I have a feeling you'll cover everything on there, and I'll be like, yeah, I don't have any questions for you, but that'll be fun. So
I'm
please,
looking forward to it.
yeah, so please stay tuned on that. And I could ramble on forever about how fun that's going to be, but we love you guys, and we appreciate everybody. Geo Sam, No Hair, Steve, Oz, all the people that showed up in there. Guy on there called Kagito Ergosumu is a new guy. Appreciate you. But yeah, everybody, we appreciate it, and much love. Peace out.
See you next time.